I'm JG Michael, and this is Parallax Views.
Hey there, Parallax Views listeners. Independent media matters, and your support makes it possible. If Parallax Views has challenged your thinking, exposed you to new ideas, or simply kept you company on your commute, now's the time to help sustain it. Listen, share, and if you can, support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/parallaxviews. One more time, that's patreon.com/parallaxviews. If you want, you can also make a one-time donation by contacting me at parallaxviewspod@protonmail.com. I can give you a link to my PayPal page if you contact me that way. Let's show what listener-supported media can do. Hey there, Parallax Views listeners. On this edition of the show, we'll be hearing from The Nation's Chris Lehmann about his article, Trump's Deep State Conspiracy Theories Are Getting Beyond His Control, which deals with the fallout from how Trump has handled the Jeffrey Epstein case. It could threaten to start a MAGA civil war. We'll be talking about that. And also, we'll talk about another article that Chris recently wrote entitled, Trump's Big Bill is Building a Big Police State. And yes, we'll be getting into ICE and mass deportations in regards to that article. All that and much more with Chris Lehmann. With that being said, let's get right to the conversation. Welcome to Parallax Views. I guess I'm very happy to have on the show. Chris Lehmann is the DC bureau chief for The Nation and a contributing editor at The Baffler. I want to thank the folks at The Nation for helping to set this up. And we have a lot to talk about, Chris, because it has been a crazy month and you have a number of articles out. What do you think's most important right now for us to focus on? I mean, the Epstein stuff seems like it's really in your face right now.
I mean, that is certainly the story convulsing Washington, where I live. I also think the ongoing politics of mass deportation and the consolidation of this new immigration police state under Trump is a really important story. And I think there's political blowback there, too, if you look at recent polling on the issue. But yeah, I'm just trying to stay afloat. Whatever we talk about this week, I'm sure next week will bring, fresh hells. So
I don't want to focus on it too much, but I initially wanted to have you on to talk about this Elon Musk
right.
third party, the America Party. Do you think this could, hurt Trump combined with the recent news about, Trump saying, there's nothing to the Epstein files, just let it go? Because I feel like those two things combined are going to cause a problem for him.
Yeah, and don't forget when, Musk and Trump had their big falling out, Musk ran to his ex account to say that, I'm going to drop the big bomb. Donald Trump is on the Epstein client list. So I do think, there's very little likelihood that an Elon Musk party would cut into the Democrat space of support. I guess he could draw some independents or low propensity voters, as they're called. But no, I think it would chiefly continue to sort of divide the MAGA base. And I think a lot of, here in DC, there's, this sort of groupthink that holds, well, Trump has survived so much, he waits out all of his legal troubles and emerges, with all the power and the backing of the Supreme Court. But the Epstein thing is not like a conventional DC scandal. It goes to at its we throw around the word cult a lot in reference to the MAGA movement, but it does have distinct sort of religious, you know, planks that help cohere the movement, and a key one is QAnon, which is, you know, basically taking the Jeffrey Epstein saga and projecting it onto a sort of mythical liberal global conspiracy to prey on children, to drink their glands, to do all this, you know, depraved stuff. And, you know, what's striking is, you know, it's been well documented that for at least 15 years, Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein fraternized a lot together. There are photos and videos of Trump at Epstein parties, and to have, you know, the you know, theology of QAnon holds that Trump is going to be the great vindicator of you know, the people who've been oppressed by this global conspiracy, and to have, you know, to be confronted with, you know, proof, which has been out there for a while, but hasn't really penetrated the MAGA bubble before, but proof that, you know, the guy you've scripted as the heroic redeemer of children was, you know, best friends with the best known child predator of our time.
Well,
It's
he even made comments, right, about, oh, that
oh
Jeffrey,
yeah,
he likes the younger ones, you
he
know.
likes young women. He appreciates beauty almost as much as I do. It's, you know, yeah, it is, as I say, this, none of this is new. But it is definitely, and it's kind of grimly amusing to me that the more Trump, you know, gets on his Truth Social account and says, there's nothing to see here, it's all a hoax, you know, there is an Epstein file, but Obama and Biden and Hillary created it. It's not working, which is very striking. You know, usually the MAGA movement falls completely into line. There is no such thing as cognitive dissonance in this movement. They just do whatever Trump tells them to do, no matter how often he contradicts himself, no matter how deeply it goes against what are supposed to be deeply ingrained MAGA beliefs. They don't care. It's an authoritarian movement. They do what the authority figure says, but here they're not. And I do think there isn't a clean way for Trump to get out of this.
Yeah, and people can learn more about this in the article you wrote yesterday for The Nation. Trump's deep state conspiracy theories are getting beyond his control. And I think that's a great way to put it because, you know, I mean, I would say that, well, not necessarily Trump himself, because if we watch some of his interviews on Fox News, he was
Yeah.
kind of weird about the Epstein files even a year ago,
He,
saying, oh, we'll go on.
oh no, I was just agreeing. You watch those interviews and he just clams up, which again
Right.
is not characteristic behavior for him.
Yeah, it'll hurt some innocent people if those files get released. Now, the
Right.
JFK files and 9/11, we can release those,
Yeah,
but
but yeah, that is, yeah, it is. There are lots of red flags around this, and you know, MAGA has done everything it can to sort of, as I was saying, paper over all the contradictions in this movement. But this goes to, like, as I was saying earlier, this core kind of spiritual conviction that, you know, if a certain segment of MAGA loses that, they lose their identity. So it's, as I was saying, it's not just a standard, you know, scandal with Pete Hegseth or Kirsty Noem or any of these other clowns. It really is a very deep rifts that's developing.
how should Democrats be reacting to this? I saw Hakeem Jeffries yesterday saying, you know, oh, it's because Trump is trying to maybe protect the billionaire class that he's in bed with, and I do wonder how should Democrats or even people to the left of Democrats sort of tackle this issue.
Well, you know, the Democrats had previously been pretty subdued in the Epstein affair because Bill Clinton is on many of these logs, flight logs to Jeffrey Epstein's island. So the Democratic establishment, you know, this is a thing with stuff that is genuinely, you know, involves this elite plutocratic caste. Ideology doesn't matter as much. And, you know, these are just depraved, powerful people looking for depraved kicks. And So I do think it is encouraging. House Democrats have they forced a vote yesterday to release the Epstein files, in which they got all the Republicans to vote no, and that's now on the record. So that's going to be a struggle for people in deep MAGA districts to come back and say, like, yeah, there's nothing to the Epstein thing. So that level of politics, I think, has been smart for the Democrats to do, and I do think they are continuing to hammer away at it. But I do think there is this, larger sort of Bill Clinton problem that's kept them not engaging on this issue as much. And maybe the fact that they are, it could be a sign that the death grip of the Clintons is loosening on the Democratic Party, which I cannot help think is a good thing. So we'll see how it plays out. I do think, like everything in Washington, what the Democrats are doing now is just sort of opportunistically pouncing on weakness in the opposition. But weakness is genuine, and it's sort of up to the Democrats to keep the heat on. And we'll see if they do.
How do you think this is kind of getting outside the scope of the article, but I wonder what you think of how can we responsibly tackle the sort of Epstein story without falling into like crazy train territory, like QAnon type things?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I think, in broad outline, what Hakeem Jeffries has said is right. That, this is this depraved class of billionaires. And, there's, it's my view that no political party in America should be defending Prince Andrew, for God's sakes. Um, there is literal royalty implicated in this, as well as financial royalty. And um, I I just think it's a good, healthy, you know, capital P populist impulse to go after these people. They are bad actors. They are preying on trafficked, defenseless young girls, and there's obviously nothing to defend in the behavior here. So, and these are there are lots of reasons why these people are objectionable. And I think what you can say is, stuff like, this is what happens when you pluck, Jeffrey Epstein used to be a math teacher at a private school in Manhattan, and he was mysteriously elevated into a partnership at Bear Stearns. And so use it as a case study to say, if this is what happens when the depraved financial elite, recruits someone who is going to turn on them. And it's an awful thing. This is why we should not have billionaires, period. But
Before we
I don't know. Go ahead.
before we transition into the police state stuff, is there anything else from that article that you wrote that you think is worth talking about? I know Michael Wolff has talked about Epstein, and there's a lot to unpack. What do you think the main points are, if I missed any?
No, I think that's basically it. I do think a lot of people don't understand the QAnon Epstein connection on the right. And that's why I think a lot of Beltway, my colleagues in the Beltway press aren't really understanding, what a potential rift this is on in the MAGA coalition. So I think that's the main thing,
You mean just the religious sort of nature of QAnon? Because I've
Mhm.
noticed that too. Um, it's almost like it creates like a hero story for these people that get sucked into
Absolutely.
QAnon. It makes them feel like they're fighting the good fight, like
Absolutely.
I'm going to expose the pedophile cabal and the Q drops. It's almost like they're playing an alternate reality game, as
Right.
some of my
There
friends
is.
have called it. But
Yeah.
it's very weird because it really gave meaning to a lot of people, and even I knew
Absolutely.
people that went down the QAnon rabbit hole that
Sure.
were decent people, and they just got sucked into this madness. It's very
No,
bizarre.
no. Well, it's I read a whole other cover story for The Nation on QAnon. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I think one key challenge of any sort of movement in mass politics is to give people something to do. And even though QAnon only exists digitally, basically they're all keyboard warriors, but as you say, it gives them a narrative where they are, it's absolute good and evil. It's, it's religious in the very sort of negatively charged sense of, the only way to defeat your enemy is to destroy them. So it is eliminationist rhetoric that's very dangerous, that appeals to the right. And yeah, it is, the religious character of MAGA, more broadly speaking, is something that's not well understood and not well reported. And QAnon is a big part of it. The New Apostolic Reformation, which is, I wrote a whole other feature story for the Nation on that movement. It's all, this kind of um, eschatological narrative that involves Trump as a savior figure. And again, the Epstein scandal takes the savior figure off the board, and true believers can't have that.
I do have to slightly disagree with you on one thing. I don't think it's just keyboard warriors. Now, what I mean by that is I have a journalist friend, Joseph Flatley, who is doing
Oh yeah,
journalism on these people in Erie, PA that claim to be pedo hunters, and they're
right,
they're just harassing trans people.
right,
Even
right.
this QAnon stuff ties into the anti-trans stuff, and it's creating jackboots, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I do think, yeah, I don't mean to dismiss, it is a dangerous movement. It has proven to be violent. QAnon was very prominent in the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th. No, it is, I'm just saying, the research element of it was all, the QAnon took off in earnest during the pandemic when everyone was locked in, didn't have anything to do, and people just started surfing, irresponsibly on the web. And that's when you had all these insane theories about how Wayfair was trafficking children in odd-shaped furniture, and that was all a product of the COVID lockdown. But yeah, it is now, it's the nature of all these religious movements that they're very syncretic. They feed on other trends and other political, ideas floating out there. So yeah, QAnon has, it sort of annexed the Epstein conspiracy as part of its whole narrative. But again, it's now at this inflection point. So we'll see what happens.
Now, you've written two pieces recently that really caught my eye. Trump's big bill is building a big police state, and ICE is following the lead of anti-Palestinian doxing groups. I really wanted to talk about where this is all headed because, I remember when I was growing up, I knew people that would listen to like Alex Jones in the 2000s, and
Oh
Jones
yeah.
would go on
Yep.
about the police state, but it
Yeah.
seems like we're really getting the police state with Trump.
No, it's true. It is grim to go back and look. There was a big you know, there was a great deal of tumult on the right after 9/11, and they ferreted out um government plans that they sort of distorted to make it seem like the Obama administration was going to build detainment camps for people it didn't disagree with or it didn't agree with. And fast forward whatever 15 years, and that is exactly what's happening now. They're
Well, it's
sweeping
very
out.
interesting to me, not
Yeah,
to interrupt you, but it's
yeah.
always interesting to me how the right is always saying it's the left behind all of this because it seems to me it's usually the right wing in this country. I mean, even with
Yeah.
Bush, I mean, Guantanamo Bay, things like that. I mean, this is what Trump is
Mhm.
doing is even beyond that, but
No, it is, and there's a long history of, fiercely policing dissent that goes back to the Palmer raids, which was under a nominal Democrat, Woodrow Wilson, but very much, a paranoid right-wing movement. Of course, McCarthyism, and there were many moral panics after 9/11. So yeah, this is, in that sense, what Trump is doing is just an acceleration of, what the right tends to do when it has state power anyway. But it is, noteworthy, especially with the passage of the big spending bill, that the detention budget for ICE is going up 365% over what it is this year. And the number kept ratcheting up. When I wrote that initial piece, ICE was slated to get 150 billion in the spending bill. It's now, I think, over 170 billion. And we're seeing, already, this is you know, government agencies like nature abhor a vacuum. So once you build out, this capacity, once you bring on 10,000 more ICE agents and God knows how many detention facilities, they're going to keep filling them up with, the people who are now already just being swept up randomly in these unconstitutional raids that are happening in places like Los Angeles. So it is a very alarming development, and I think it got a little because of all the other awful features of that bill. Cuts to Medicaid, cuts to SNAP support, cuts, excuse me, to Affordable Care Act provisions. Um, I think the ICE stuff sort of snuck in under the radar, even though you had, JD Vance tweeted at the time that this is the only thing that matters in this bill, that we create this. And, it's the reason they believe that is this gives them the capacity to lock up their political enemies. It's really that simple.
And you point out in your article on the big bill and the police state that these concerns aren't that like theoretical. I mean, we're talking
Yeah.
about things like the Electronic Registration Information Center. I mean, they're creating databases on voter citizenship data.
Yeah, I wrote in the wake of an NPR report about this. There's an unprecedented searchable database that is now being erected in the Trump administration, where Social Security, under the influence of the Doge Bros, there is sharing all the Social Security information of every citizen with ICE. And ProPublica has since done a follow-up story and that's more detailed and equally alarming. We've never had such a the government has never had such a database at its disposal. There is a healthy civil libertarian tradition in this country where we don't trust the government to have that level of actionable data. The Social Security information was quarantined within the Social Security Administration, as it should be. But now all that is all being leveled. There's this new searchable database that, again, can just be used for whatever whim. The alibi for it is it's to prevent voter fraud by undocumented immigrants, of which I think there have been maybe 6 credible cases, confirmed cases. So that's BS, and so you have to look beyond that to what ICE is doing now. It is targeting sanctuary cities that are not, falling into line behind Stephen Miller's insane quota system, and doing everything they can just to break the back of functioning economies. Not only it's spreading beyond Los Angeles to raids on Imperial Valley farmers. It's yeah, it can metastasize at any moment with the kind of resources and data now at ICE's disposal.
I was gonna say I'm in Florida. This is like the heart of Trump land. But what's interesting is
Alligator Alcatraz, dude. Yeah, yeah.
but well, even people here that I know, like neighbors and whatnot, who have generally been supportive of Trump, they're really put off by his immigration policy. Now they may not they're not like open borders or anything, people, but
Right.
they what they'll say to me is, well, why don't they go after the criminals? Like they're going after people that are just have been here for 30 years. Do you think that's also like going to play into politics going forward? Because I feel like there's a lot of MAGA people that are uncomfortable with this, or I'm noticing it a little.
If you look at recent polling, both Gallup and Quinnipiac have polls showing a really dramatic turn away from the mass deportation policy as people have seen it, implemented. So yeah, it is, I think, something that could also hurt Trump. But again, it's sort of up to the opposition party to make the most of it. And lamentably, the Democrats, in my view, have been terrible on immigration. They have
That's actually what I wanted to get into next because
right.
you said you wrote here the Democrats' longstanding avoidance strategy helped create the massive demagogic void filled by the MAGA movement in the first place. Maybe you could speak more to that for my audience.
Sure. I mean, during the last general election, Kamala Harris campaigned on not on, the idea that, mass deportations are un-American and represent an existential threat to the constitutional order. She campaigned on the fact that Trump instructed congressional Republicans to ditch a very draconian immigration bill that originated out of the Senate the prior year, which had many awful provisions, like getting rid of probationary status for asylum seekers. It was another, border crackdown bill that did nothing to address, real problems. And, Democrats also just don't acknowledge, it's a simple fact that the immigration moral panic that Trump has stoked now for a decade is like everything else Trump does and says a lie, which is to say that there is no immigrant crime wave. Immigrants actually commit violent crime at a significantly lower percentage than the native-born American population does. They are not a drain on entitlements like Social Security and Medicare. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. They pay into these programs without drawing benefits because they can't. They contribute, and we will see this as, alas, mass deportations continue. They contribute immense value to the American economy. A Congressional Budget Office report from 2023 found that over the next decade, immigrants' contribution to the American economy will be $10 trillion, a trillion with a T. So when you hear all of this MAGA, nonsense sloganeering that we're facing an invasion, which by the way is the actual legal argument they're making to justify all these bullshit. I assume I can swear. I don't know. These executive orders that Trump has signed. And I can't think of any invasion in the history of our civilization where the invaders gave you $10 trillion. That is just not a thing. So yeah, Democrats have been afraid to tackle all of these core empirical matters head on because they've been cowed. They think that this is a winning issue for Trump. We can't, frighten off independents or centrists or whatever. But, at some point, a lie is a lie, and you have to call it out.
Not to interrupt, but do you think there's also a bit of the sort of James Carville strategy coming into
Oh,
play where
totally.
Carville said recently, we just need to roll over and play dead. Just don't protest anything. Just let Trump step on himself. And I'm like, I'm not sure that's going to work in this case.
It hasn't worked so far. I mean, there is not any evidence, I think, in fact, the last sort of big win, unambiguous win, at least for Democrats in Congress, was the 2018 midterms. And that was all about the resistance strategy. That was all about like, you have to elect Democrats to stop this awful agenda that's being enacted. So I do think characters like Carville and Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries have this idea that, somehow the Trump movement is this aberration and outlier. And after the fever breaks, we will revert to like the golden mean of like, power sharing, compromise. And none of that is going to happen. Our politics changed fundamentally in 2016, and we are not going back to, whatever bipartisan patty cake these people revere in their imaginations. So the only way, if as the Democrats are always saying, and correctly in my view, the Trump movement is an existential threat to our democracy, that Project 2025 is this authoritarian agenda that's going to, reverse generations of progress. if all that's true, you have to fight them. Like there is no other way. You can't roll over and play dead. You can't say, oh, our norms will save us, the courts will save us. Uh, that is just not a thing any longer in our politics. And I wish to God, like all the Democratic consultant class would be fired en masse and you bring new people on. But
Just two more things here, if you have a few more minutes. I know I've kept you already for 30 minutes, but you know, I really liked that piece on the big bill. You use that term police state. 'Cause I think we should call it police state measures. I think we should be sort of talking about civil libertarian values. And in some ways, I worry that we've moved away from talking about those things because, I talked to Katrina vanden Heuvel about this. The right wing has sort of said, we're the true patriots. All leftists hate America. Oh, we're the ones for freedom. Leftists hate freedom. But I think it's actually the opposite in a lot
no,
of
no,
ways.
it's absolutely true. And these again are issues if the Democratic Party had a modicum of creativity and imagination, you can easily flip. Look, there we see news footage literally every day of ICE agents in masks. Like that is what happens in Eastern Bloc authoritarian regimes. You have an completely opaque and unaccountable police force acting in the interest of the state. So call it by its true name. Absolutely. It's obscene to me, excuse me, that the right gets to have this sort of monopoly on all of these tropes and all of this language from what is an honorable tradition of civil liberties and patriotism.
And I think we've seen this with Mamdani, who I think is running sort of patriotic, like I love New York campaign, and it worked.
Absolutely. And I think, the genius of Mandami, in my view, is, you have all of these people, the sort of gatekeepers in New York, most especially the New York Times, like making up these insane non-stories about his college admissions or whatever. And they're trying to create this, idea that, Satan walks among us. He's like a foreigner. He's like he's going to institute Sharia law. He doesn't disavow the Intifada, blah, blah, blah. And then people look at Mamdani and he's this smiley, he's a totally approachable, like a regular person you meet in New York. And there's no way, there's a reason all of those desperate gambits are failing is like people just look at the evidence of, this is a guy who wants to, make the city more affordable and he wants to tax the wealthy and he wants free buses. And that is not Sharia law or whatever you're going to make up. So, yeah.
Very last thing, and I know we can't cover it in depth, but this article, ICE is following the lead of anti-Palestinian doxing groups. Can you just give my listeners maybe the outlines or the contours of that story and the connection between the attacks on pro-Palestinian activists and how this relates to the tactics of ICE?
Sure. There's a lawsuit in Boston right now brought by the American Association of University Professors and other, speaking of civil liberties, groups interested in preserving academic freedom, in which a Homeland Security / ICE administrator gave testimony that they went through all of the entries on this shadowy Israeli website called Canary Mission, which basically is a blacklist site. It puts up the names of people who have been student activists against the Gaza war. Famously, I'm spacing on the Turkish student's name now at Tufts, who got arrested in that horrific video with masked ICE agents. But she wrote literally one op-ed for the Tufts University student newspaper, and then was wound up on the Canary Mission website. And then a few months later, ICE went after her. Same thing with
This is
Khalil.
Ozturk you're talking about, by the way.
Yes,
But yeah.
Ozturk. Thank you. And and Khalil at Columbia, it was the same story. He was a lead organizer of the Gaza protests there, winds up in deportation proceedings and this sort of black site detention facility in Louisiana. So what you're seeing is the U.S. government working hand in glove with an anonymous smear website that is accusing protesters against the Gaza war of being anti-Semites with virtually no evidence to support these claims, and they are using this as their, university-based campaign to deport student protesters, and it's very alarming again that you have the government, which we sort of trust with all of this vital information, just using what are in many cases vastly exaggerated claims, and that's the most generous term I can think of in connection with Canary Mission. This is the sort of site that should be at the margins of public discourse and not driving immigration policy in any way, shape, or form.
I just wanted to add to that briefly. I mean, I hope people know this website. They go after not just students, but like professors. I've known UCLA professors that it documents, and they're trying to keep these people from getting jobs. If they're on the list, you can cross-reference. And I do think it's important that people draw a connection between ISIS tactics and this group. How do you think that's been overlooked too much?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a report in Politico about this trial, and I don't think a lot of the rest of the mainstream media has picked up this particular connection. One of the slogans of Canary Mission is, they are ensuring that today's radicals are not tomorrow's employees. So it is very much a vigilante doxing site that is seeking to economically punish people for expressing political views, which again, that's un-American. I'm sorry. And the idea that, we are now in a phase of what I call armed McCarthyism,
I like that. Where'd you come up with that?
I just used it to promote that article on social media.
I like the armed McCarthyism.
Yep.
I mean, yeah.
So it's, again, one should never forget that Roy Cohn, Joe McCarthy's right-hand man, was Donald Trump's mentor in New York politics. So, yeah.
I know I have to let you get going. How can my listeners keep up with your work? And do you really see any glimmers of hope right now, or are we in doomland?
Yeah, I think I will plead the fifth on the latter question. But you can follow my work at The Nation, obviously. I'm also, episodically turn up at my old home, The Baffler, and I have a piece coming out in the next Harper's. So, I hesitate to direct anyone to my Twitter account or anyone's Twitter account at this stage of things. But I am on Blue Sky. I can never remember the address, but, you can search me there.
Thank you so much, Chris, for coming on Parallax Views. I really appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thank you. Take care.
This edition of Parallax Views brought to you by the $10 and above tier supporters of Parallax Views on Patreon. So, with that in mind, producers credit shoutouts to Galen, Matt, Gunnar, Mark, Simon, Alexander, Catherine, G, Tilo, Emilia, Jeremy, Jeff, WV, John, Bert, Brian, Elliot, Darko, Michael, Brace, James, Nick, Mark M, Merisham, Galen, Gareth, Arlen, Bo, Christopher, Michael, Gigadelic Media, Will, Chance, Chase, JC, Dan, Big Bob, David H, Y, Kellerman, Saded 13, Kathleen, David, Ava, Bob, The West Bank Robbery Podcast, Jamie, Enoch, Gary, Max, Ishtofer, James, Martin, Matthew Ho, Brian, Nobody, Thomas, and Dano. Well, that does it for this edition of Parallax Views. As always, please consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/parallaxviews. One more time, that's patreon.com/parallaxviews. And with that being said, until next time, you've been listening to Parallax Views with Parallax Views to Parallax Views with Parallax Views.
The way out is not simply to say, don't do it, just to prohibit. It's nothing else. If we don't do it, others will be doing it like crazy. So, we have to confront the problem. But no, basically, I know of the great anxieties, problems, new forms of control, but it's also new forms of freedom. This is why I always emphasize that internet and all this new digital stuff, it's a very ambiguous phenomenon, but it's the field of struggle. New forms of enslavement, but at the same time, new incredible forms of freedom. We have to accept the fight with no nostalgia for old, allegedly more authentic communities or whatever. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid.